Hello and welcome. So today we are going to start a brand new art journal. But have you ever treated yourself to a new art journal and then you're faced with a terrifying blank page? Not only are we having to deal with the blank page, but it's a whole blank journal. The fear of getting that perfect first page is stopping you from even starting. Well, today I'm going to dive into 6 top tips to help you get started and just thoroughly enjoy your new journal. I'm so excited about my brand new journal. This is another gorgeous pink pig one, and it's the first one I've had with a nice pretty cover or colour of cover, so very excited but also very nervous. So I'm doing the first thing I always do when I get a new journal, and that is to swatch. As you can see, half the page I am covering with gesso and half the page I leave untreated. I'm just using my favourite mediums that I always tend to pull out and just seeing how they play. You might get used to your mediums, but when you get a new journal, it's a new paper type, and I have to say, even though I have had many pink pig journals, the paper type on this is slightly different, and it did respond slightly differently, so I am pleased that I did swatch and I got familiar. And again, it's one of those no pressure things, so a nice easy way to get started, and it's on the back page as well, so all good. My second tip is to make a mess. Sometimes we are so nervous about making a mess of a page and making a page that is horrible and horrible art that it paralyses us from starting. So if we just go ahead and make our messiest, worst, awfulest page to start off with, then we've already done that. We've already ruined it. Not ruined it, but we've already made our messy art. There's nothing going to be worse than this. So I've just literally written there, I am making a mess because this is my journal, and I have just scribbled with some distress crayons and some pencils. This looks an absolute mess, but do you know what? I really enjoyed doing this. Yeah, there was no pressure at all, and that's it. We've made our awful page now, so anything that we make going forward, whether we are 100% in love with it or not, is all good. Third tip, don't start at the front page. And fourth tip is not to pressure yourself to complete an entire page. So with this page, I am not looking to start a page from beginning to end. I am literally just going to make a background. It might stay in my journal as a background, or it might be that someday I'm feeling it and I decide to put something else on top of it. I watch many artists and with sketchbook ideas or ways to fill your sketchbook, and a lot of what they do is this. They fill it with watercolour shapes and things like that, but I think because we are used to art journaling and mixed media, we kind of feel that there has to be something on top of this. We have to bring it all together, but in many people's art practice books, they have pages just like this, so we can embrace that too. We can have it just, I mean, that's so pretty. I've just literally layered circles of watercolour. They're not perfect by any means. We've got some splodging going on, and we've got some of the colours mingling in together, and that's a really pretty page on its own. Or as I said, at some point I might just be kind of, putting stuff into my bit box and thinking, do you know what, that would work really well on this page. So that is a page there with no pressure. So the next tip, I can't remember what I'm on. I think, is it on fourth? I think we're on fourth. Is to work out with the journal. So I am working on a separate bit of paper. I am playing with some of my stamps, as you can see, because I keep sticking my head right in the screen. And now this one, I was actually quite glad I'd worked off the page, because I start this page off working with distress inks. I kind of wanted a glow in the middle of the kind of where the houses was, the sort of little window of the tree, and then I decided to put the distress inks, but I really wasn't liking the way the distress inks looked, and then I decided to slap watercolour on it, and I didn't like the disconnect between the way the distress inks looked and the way the watercolour looked, so I just covered the whole thing in watercolour and created almost a bit of an underpainting for me to work on. So the underpainting worked out a tad brighter than I'd expected, so I have to say at this point I was really glad that we were not working within the journal, so we are working on a separate bit of paper. I decided to bring out the details of that tree by using some pencils. These are the polychromatic Faber-Castell Polychromos. They're kind of quite a new purchase, or actually they were gifted to me by a friend. A friend bought them for me for my 25th wedding anniversary in March, and I have to say that I'm already, you know, a lot of the pencils are getting shorter and shorter because I am using them quite a lot. So I just use these to build up the colourway of this particular image, and at this point it's coming together, but it's not quite what I expected. So it needed a bit more oomph. So I brought out my watercolours again and tried to sort of create a little bit of a canopy. The reason I'd kind of done it like this is when I originally drew this painting, I was in, or the sketch that turned into the stamp, I was in a fish and chip shop, and it was like these vines that looped, and I was trying to create that look, and I didn't really like how it was turning out. So I pulled out some more of the stamps that have these sort of solid leaf images, and I pulled out 2 Memento inks in different forms of green. I think we have forest and sage, and I just kind of repeat stamping those until we've built up a whole load of foliage. Wasn't quite what was in my head when I started, but I did start liking the project a lot more at this point. I decided to deepen those colours by just sort of pulling the edge of the ink pad against the paper, and it's beginning to get there. It's still not perfect, but it's beginning to get there. So I pull out some more stamps and start repeat stamping again, this time using black. I think that kind of added a little bit more depth to it. And I decided that the colour at the bottom was a bit too strong. So I did my best, because it was a water-based product, was to try and lift it. So I soaked it with loads of water, left it for a while, and then start pulling it up with tissue. I think I did that 2 or 3 times. I didn't maybe get it as pale as I wanted, but it was better. I then decided to sort of put this brown at the bottom, thinking it might look like a bit of a pathway. Didn't like that either, but thankfully with it being watercolour, we just pulled that straight back up. As you can see, I'm really going back and forward with this piece. So as I said, once again, I'm glad that this was a page that I was doing out with my journal. Finally, I just come in with some acrylic markers to add some little white highlights and some pink dots to kind of represent flowers. And then at this point, now that I've got it that I like it, I can glue it into my journal. So we're in the second page of the journal, and we have glued it in. No, actually we're on the 3rd page. I'm doing so much, I can't keep up. But anyway, we have glued that in. I decided it needed a sentiment, so I stamped out one of them, but I have to say I was really struggling with this particular sentiment. I mean, I love the sentiment. It kind of says, there is wisdom in the woods if you walk slow enough to hear it. So I thought it suited the image very well. But I just found that the text was too big for this particular page. So I keep sort of chopping into it and moving it around and trying to get it so that I like it. I don't know, actually editing it doesn't look that bad, but at the time it just felt really clunky and I really didn't like it. And so despite having moved it and faffed back and forth for as long as I could think of, I just gave up, and in the end just went for a sentiment that was much smaller, which says, I think it is, where leaves dance and stories breathe. So I promise you we are about to get to that. There you go, that's me giving up, and there's me got my nice little small sentiment, and I have put that down instead, and I just think that works so much better with this particular page. So the next thing that we are going to do is, or my next tip is to recreate a previous art journal page. So if you have art journaled before, we will cover lots of circumstances, but if you've art journaled before, look through your art journals and see if there is a page that you have made in the past and really love. Now, as you can see, this particular tree style thing turned up in multiple journals. I created it, fell in love with it. Then I created it in a bigger page thinking I was going to add elements to it, like characters and things like that. But again, just loved it too much that I couldn't bring myself to alter it. So I knew that I liked this page and I decided to do it again. So I create it by using this kind of stencil mask. It's from the Stencil Suite collection. It's meant to have a bit of an Alice in Wonderland theme or nod, and I put some Ecoline pens on it, spritz it with water and put it down. Now this is where I can really feel the difference in the paper between my previous Pink Pig journal and this one. The pigment sort of absorbed into the page a bit more, so even though I'd used the same technique, I I kind of got really different results. It still looks like a fabulous quirky tree, but I love getting to know a new journal like this, like just seeing how it responds to different things. So actually sometimes doing something that's really familiar, but seeing how it ends up slightly different is a really good learning process as well. It really helps you to get to know your journal, the paper in the journal, what sort of techniques it will enjoy, and different things like that. So once I've got this base layer down of all these colours, once again I come in with my Polychromos pencils and add a few little details. I'm just adding a few little branches and emphasising the shading on the trunk of the tree, just so that it looks more like a tree rather than a big blob. I kind of did want to do something different because, as I said, this already appears in 2 journals. So I pulled out my Artex markers and I decided to make little dots. I decided that blue was a little bit too blue, and so I covered it over with a white, but I've kind of gone in with multiple dots. It looks a lot more like a fantasy tree now anyway. Not that you get rainbow trees in general, but it's even more fantasy than the original rainbow tree. I just scribble around all the dots to emphasise them, and then I decide just to do lots of scribbling all over the tree to kind of give it that look of lots of foliage within it. And it still looks the same. You can see where I've taken the inspiration from, but it also looks really quite different to the other ones that I've done. And because it was more familiar, I felt a lot more confident working straight into the page, because it's the first time we've tried to do a completed page within the journal. Now, I've said this might be your first journal and you might have never made a journal page before, in which case, if you are coming to art journaling through card making or through scrapbooking, pull out a layout that you have done. So this is a card that I've made in the past, and I am now going to create a page based on or inspired by that particular card. So this is, I think this is a really good way of doing something, especially if it's your own work, because it's something that feels familiar and that feels yours. However, if you have picked up an art journal and you have no crafty experience, this is the first time you've ever picked up anything, you can still use this tip, but borrow somebody's idea. There are many ideas. You're welcome to choose anything from my channel. A lot of us that create and share on YouTube or on various social media platforms do it to inspire. So you can have a look at, if you type in art journaling ideas or inspiration or sketchbook ideas, you will come up with a wealth of ideas and that you can just lift. Obviously, if you do decide to share those on social media, do give credit to the person that you got the inspiration from, but I'm sure they'd be more than happy to let you borrow their idea. That's why they're sharing it in the first place. And once again, it just gets that creative juices flowing. All of these things that I did to make this journal and to start on these different pages, by the time that I had done them, I was just getting more and more into creative flow. And as you do that, you naturally get more confident. So we had the swatching, we had the messy page, we had the background. All of those were complete no pressure items, but by that point we had kind of exercised our creative muscle a little bit, and so was feeling it a bit more. So then it became easier to try and do a completed page, but we started off easy by coming off the page. Now we're working in the page, but with things that we feel familiar with. Now, every time you sit down to do your journal practice, you might want to do something like this. You might want to consider having maybe a sidekick journal or something like that, so that you can kind of get that creative flow going before you end up actually creating a page. This page is very similar to the card that I made, but different. I ended up adding die cuts. I wanted the greenery to look a little bit more fuller, so I added the die cuts. I also kind of took the Harlequin a bit further across the page than I did the card, and now I am just finishing off with the white gel pen, and then taking off the tape. Now this did actually tear my paper slightly, so again, another learning curve for this particular journal. I think I need to heat the washi tape a bit more, or at least put it down on my clothing first, but it did sort of, this paper, it did sort of lift it a little bit, not enough for you to really notice, but again, I learned something, and that is all good, because that is actually what your journal is for. Sometimes, because of the internet, we see many gorgeous journal pages and we feel we have to create beautiful art in every page, but we don't. This is a place to learn. And that comes to my 5th tip, is to write some form of affirmation. So this I just printed off on the computer, and it just says, this is a space to explore, not impress. I'm allowed to make ugly pages. Perfection is not the point. And I've actually put this on the front page of my journal. So I've kind of now gone back to the front. I've made this kind of positive statement, and it helped me just to remember what an art journal is actually for. Many artists keep a sketchbook, and they make a mess in their sketchbook. They learn in their sketchbook, they explore in their sketchbook, and that is what an art journal is. We can take what we learn from our art journals and apply it to card making, to mixed media projects, to scrapbook layouts, lots of different things. And it's embracing that that's what it is. It's not about perfection. So a reminder of that in your journal is also a good tip. So that's our 6 tips. Hopefully by now we are feeling in the flow, we are feeling a little bit more confident, and we're ready just to tackle our journal and to play in it and enjoy it. So to finish off with, I am just creating one last page without a tip in mind. I am literally just playing. By this point I was having so much fun. Already loved the many pages, because by this point we'd already created about 7 pages. So it was good. We were well and truly into our journal and no longer needed to fear it. So I just actually sketched through a stencil, coloured the little diamond harlequin shapes in, which gave it a little bit of a different look. Picked out a few images from my bit box, random mix of images, but I actually love it. That is me. I like to tend to collage random bits and pieces together. So these are all images and stamps that I have. I tend to kind of stamp and colour lots of things, so I have loads of stuff ready, and that was just ready to go to play. Just giving them a little bit of grounding. I do like to ground my images. I think it looks so much better. And then finally adding a doodly border. Again, that's one of those things that is very me. I like to frame my work. And then I just add some different sentiments. So I hope this inspires you to get started with your art journal. Remember, this is not a place for perfection. It's a place to play and to enjoy. So please do take the pressure off yourself. Let me know which of these tips that you feel help you the most. I would love to know. So please do let me know. And we have created some gorgeous pages in the process of taking the pressure off. If you have enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing, and I will be back next Friday with a brand new video. So I will see you then.